Hi, my name is Jessa. Please join me as we look together our top 10 unusual ancient tomb discoveries you've never seen before. Oh, and before we begin, in the last video I was in, the top 10 most evil women from history you never knew about, I gave you guys a riddle. Did you get it? The riddle was, what can go through glass without breaking it? The answer is, drumroll please, light. Your next riddle will be at the end of this video. Anyways, let's get started. Number 10, Road to El Templo. It's not Road to El Dorado, although it would be cool to assume the movie made by DreamWorks predicted the whole map with a snake statue leading Miguel and Tulio to the great city. But actually, in March 18, 2023, archaeologists were surprised to find a serpent sculpture which served as a guide from the El Templo in Yucatan, Mexico. Excavations have been financed by the Program for the Improvement of Archaeological Zones by the federal government, which is how they found the serpent sculpture. The serpent statue is oriented towards the sacred cenote and is limited to the Sacbe, meaning white road, which was a ceremonial route constructed to connect important structures or plazas with ceremonial centers. Archaeologists suggest the statue and Sacbe is a symbolic representation of a Yucatec Maya feathered serpent god. Number 9, coming to Egypt. It's no surprise that when the Romans and Egyptians interlinked with one another as major civilizations, they would also trade among themselves the riches as well as the religions that guided their traditions for many centuries. In an article that was released in April 2022, archaeologists were impressed to discover an entire temple dedicated to Zeus in the northern western Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Discovered at Tel El Farma site, the temple was noted as Zeus Cassios, or just referring to temple for Zeus the god of the sky in Syria's Mount Cassios. The Supreme Council of Antiquities said that in 1910, French Egyptologist Jean found engraved blocks suggesting that a temple once stood in the area, but it wasn't until recently until they noticed the columns that stood 25 feet tall and lintel had been used to build the temple's gate. Inscriptions indicate that the structure was renovated by Roman Emperor Hadrian during the early 2nd century AD. Roughly around 2020-2022, archaeologists had discovered a 1800-year-old gladiator arena in Turkey. Researchers used 200-year-old records to uncover a Colosseum-like area where gladiators and animals fought to the death in ancient towns of Masturara in western Turkey. The nearly perfectly preserved arena seems to be able to seat up to 15,000 to 20,000 fans. The amphitheater dates to around 200 AD during the reign of the Severan dynasty. This is a time when the region was rapidly expanding and increasing its wealth and status. Formerly, the site of immense and barbarous matches had been hidden by centuries due to the accumulation of nature, and it wasn't noticed until some of its stonework began rising up from the ground, and historians are actually rather impressed with its preservation. Different cultures, including the Spartans, Ionians, Persians, and ancient Romans, repeatedly rebuilt the city over the centuries, and an analysis of 67 individual bones shown that many had healed wounds as a clear sign that they were prized fighters who received high-quality medical treatment. Rather than participating in mass brawls, the researchers wrote the evidence pointed to gladiators undertaking one-on-one duels governed by a precise set of rules. They planned to conduct geophysical surveys to learn about the portions of the buildings that remained underground, as well as use laser scans to recreate a virtual 3D image of the arena. Number 7, ancient graves of the Gaza. Just a little play on the words of the beautiful film Graves of the Fireflies. In 2022, Palestinian workers in the Gaza Strip have found dozens of ancient graves, including 2 sarcophagi made out of lead in a Roman-era cemetery, dating back as far as 2,000 years ago. These archaeologists describe this to be one of the largest cemeteries ever discovered in Gaza. They came across this site during a construction of an Egyptian funding housing project in the northern Gaza Strip, and ever since then, the crew have worked with the help of French experts. They had carefully and extensively looked over the site, as well as this area is home to 2.3 million people and has a rich history stemming from its location on ancient trade routes between Egypt and the Levant. The discovery of 60 graves at the site in January marked a major finding, and that number had gone up to 135. Researchers have studied over 100 of these graves, and all of these tombs have revealed a huge amount of information about the cultural material and also the state of the health of the vast population, pathologies from which this population might have suffered. The sarcophagi they discovered that was made up of lead even had featured designs of grapes, and the other one had images of dolphins. The discovery of lead sarcophagi here is a first and unusual for Gaza, and Palestinian archaeologists like Fadel Al-Otul suspects that there might be some royal social elites buried around too. The skeletons discovered on site will be sent out of Gaza for further analysis, and the remains are set to return to the Hamas-led Ministry of Antiquities and Tourism. They really really hope that they can tell the stories of the Gazans and help provide more of its archaeological sites, but time will tell if they can due to the pace of current developments. Number 6, they see me rollin' in Pompeii. Apparently it's a universal and historic norm for humans to show off their new whip when pulling up to the club. As for those living in Pompeii, they were no strangers to high-end society as well. In face of most of Pompeii's citizens, up to the disastrous eruptions that wiped out the entire city, were relatively aspiring to wealth, and both women and men had the right to personal wealth. Both genders were open to trade groups. Of course, some trades like political were more exclusive to men, and social groups could go from freedmen to merchants to political. Overall, the societal status of Pompeii was that of a very hustling and bustling normal city. And so with that being said, the satyr and nymph designs, ropes with flower decorations, and high iron wheels were all chariot characteristics during an archaeological exploration in Pompeii. The ceremonial chariot was considered a luxurious ride compared to others commonly seen during the time about 2,000 years ago. To some scholars, they even noted that this ride is a Lamborghini chariot at the time used to transport the elite to ancient events and festivals. The luxury and the amazing preservation of the chariot on the site left the archaeologists amazed. Number 5, Le Festin in Pompeii. Speaking of Pompeii, like all fancy restaurants, they all have their prized, renowned dishes that they all love to serve. And they don't just serve ratatouille, they actually serve rat to eat. According to this restaurant found by archaeologists, this food hotspot was known to serve honey-roasted rodent. Interestingly, there was excavations of goat, pig, and dog bones and snail shells, which shed more light on the restaurant's meat-rich and exotic menu. Experts believe prepared food would have been displayed in large dolia jars set in holes carved in the stone counter, kind of similar to today's takeout restaurants. And although there were no Uber Eats back then, you can definitely order this restaurant meal under Uber Eats now, because the good news is that this restaurant is actually open to the public, so explorers can discover the delicacies in the ancient Italian city. But no rat, I'm afraid, that's not there. The location also served a bit of a somber note as a gravesite during the eruption of Pompeii's Mount Vesuvius, as the body of the restaurant owner as well as other patrons were discovered in the excavation of the food joint. Number 4, shackled together forever. In 2016, at least 80 shackled skeletons were discovered in Palaio, a suburb of Athens, and their hands were shackled, and true to their discovery, many lie with their mouths open as if they were screaming. The skeletons belong to young men who were apparently in good health, and the archaeologists believe that these men may have been followers of Cylon, the nobleman and Olympian champion who attempted to take over Athens around 7th century BCE. The infamous event was known as the Cylon Affair, and after Cylon's coup failed, his followers took refuge in Athena's temple. The followers were then found by their enemies and killed right after leaving the temple. Pottery nearby the site helped archaeologists date the burials to the period where the coup took place. However, it is also possible that the skeletons belonged to slaves or criminals. Number 3, I'ma Take a Seat. 2005 was a fun time. It was the year Microsoft released the Xbox 360, YouTube had their first video uploaded, and Rihanna's Pon de Brie play went off, and so did Nickelback's Photograph. And the best Star Wars movie, Revenge of the Sith, showed us who really had the high ground. But in Honduras, they found someone sitting upright underground instead. The position of the body, the structure of the tomb, and several unexpected artifacts suggest the interred individual was a political or priestly figure. The entombed individual was found with a jade hung around from his necklace and dozens of jade beads of various sizes. The remains belonged to a 50-year-old man with various illnesses, as he had poor use of his left arm, a poor arterial flow through his upper spinal cord, and a chronic infection of the skull known as mastoiditis. The tomb was also quite unexpectedly inside a temple far away from Kopen's ceremonial center, the Acropolis, where most important figures were buried. Number 2, vampires in Poland. In 2013, graves were discovered during the construction of a new road near a town in Poland. The deceased had been decapitated and buried with their heads between their feet. Decapitation was believed to keep the dead from rising from their graves. Why? Because people back then in this era thought people were vampires. Archaeologists in various Slavic countries have found multiple examples of vampire burials. Others later discovered graves showcase other methods for keeping the dead from coming back. For example, the skeleton of a woman was buried with a sickle over her pelvis. Other skeletons were found buried with sickles over their throats so that they wouldn't have their head in case they rose from the grave. Other methods of burial found include burying the body upside down or with a brick in their mouth. Either way, as horror movies go, that's still a pretty intense image to think about. Finally, number 1, the Screaming Mummy. His name starts and ends with just E. When he was discovered in 1886 by the head of Egypt's Antiquities Service, Man E was found in a plain coffin wrapped in sheepskin. However, his hand and feet were bound, and probably the most terrifying part was the fact that his face was frozen, kind of looking like he was screaming. Due to the way his face and his body was contracted, the scientists believe that Man E might have been poisoned or buried alive. Whatever the cause, the man was definitely in pain when he died. Also, he was not mummified in the traditional way, and still all of his internal organs were still there. There are some odd suspicions of who this body belonged to, as some experts might even suggest it could be Prince Pantaware, where the son of Ramesses III was part of a conspiracy where his mother part a coup against his father. Conspirators back then were typically caught and gotten rid of, but whoever this mummy was, his expression was captivated all over the world. What's your favorite on the list? Did you learn anything today? Let me know. Oh yeah, right. Your next riddle. Are you guys ready? I have no life, but I can die. What am I? Be sure to put your answer in the comments below and I'll reveal the answer in the next video's top 10 disturbing ancient China facts that would leave you speechless. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jessa. Be sure to like and subscribe and I'll see your beautiful faces in the next one. Bye bye.